I'm sure your feed is already flooded with Opus 4.7 feature recaps this week. Skip them. The feature recap isn't the update. The update is 5 specific habit changes, and if you miss them, your prompts still work, but they're quietly getting worse. I've been in tech for 20 years, and I currently lead multiple programs developing AI models. I've been running 4.7 for the last couple of days on my AI-powered client acquisition system, and I've had to lock in 5 habit changes already. Get these right and the model does its best. Miss them and you'll keep getting degraded output. The first 4 are tactical. What to put in your first prompt, how many follow-up questions to ask at once, which effort setting to default to, and why you should stop setting thinking budgets manually. The 5th is the mindset update that sits under all 4. Once you see it, the first 4 stop feeling like separate tips and start feeling like one idea. We'll get to it last. If you've been prompting Opus 4.7 the way you used to prompt 4.6, you're making the model's output worse with every turn. And by turn, I mean each exchange back and forth. You send a message and the model answers. That's one turn. Now, the first habit is loading your first turn with everything the model needs to execute. The task, constraints that come with that, acceptance criteria, file locations, all of it. You have to give it up front now. This matters now because 4.7 does more reasoning on every user turn than 4.6 did. Every time you drip into a new constraint mid-conversation, you're making the model re-reason the entire context from scratch. 4.6 handled that lightly. 4.7 doesn't. The longer the conversation and the more corrections you pile on, the more quality you lose. When you adopt this, you stop having conversations with the model and start giving it assignments. Your first message becomes the brief instead of an opener. And because 4.7 is strong enough to execute a brief, you get a single turn outputs that are usable without the ping pong. And if you're refactoring, name the refactor, say what should stay the same, list what tests need to pass, and point at where the files live. If you're designing, give it the constraints and the definition of done. One brief at the start. I learned this the hard way on my client acquisition system. Output quality kept dipping after about 5 turns until I started briefing properly at the start. A well-briefed AI outperforms a well-guided one. Always keep that in mind. The next one is related to the first, but it is the part most people get wrong even after they learn first habit. The second is batching your follow-up questions into a single turn. If you have 5 concerns after seeing the first response, put all 5 in one message instead of one at a time. And the reason for that is pretty much the same as the habit 1. Every user turn adds reasoning overhead. A quick also do this follow-up looks cheap, I know, but it isn't. On 4.7, each of those quick follow-ups force a full reasoning pass over the whole conversation. The real cost of sequential follow-ups is coherence loss. When you feed the model 5 concerns at once, it can weigh them together and find a response that balances all of them. When you feed them one at a time, each response optimizes for the last thing you said, and the overall coherence slowly disappears. With this habit, you move faster, you get better outputs, and you stop paying the coherence tax. 2 or 3 clean exchanges instead of 10 or 15 messy ones. When the first response comes back, just resist the urge to fire off a quick one more thing. Hold your questions, read the output fully, then send everything you want adjusted in one consolidated message. Now the third habit, it's a small setting change with a disproportionate effect on your output quality. Effort levels are Claude code thing. You won't find them in regular Claude chat or in cowork. They only show up inside Claude code, where you can tell the model how hard to reason about a task. The options are low, medium, high, xhigh, and max. Xhigh is new in 4.7. It sits between high and max, and it's now the default. At low effort levels, the model reasons lightly and answers fast. At max, it reasons as hard as it can, which is sometimes what you want and often an overkill. xhigh gives you strong autonomy and careful reasoning without the runaway token usage and latency that max can produce on long agentic runs. xhigh earns its place in difference between serviceable and excellent. High gets you a usable output on most tasks. xhigh catches the edge cases and the subtle bugs you didn't think to flag on anything that's intelligence sensitive, like API design, schema migrations, or debugging the code you don't fully understand. xhigh is the level where 4.7 actually shows what it can do. Once you start trusting xhigh on hard tasks, you stop second guessing the model. You set the effort high enough to earn the trust, and then you work with the output. That's the goal. Also, when you upgrade from 4.6, basically start using 4.7, don't just port your old effort setting. Experiment with xhigh first. And remember, you can toggle between levels during the same task to manage token costs on simpler steps. On my client acquisition pipeline, xhigh actually caught a production bug in my lead scoring logic that the high setting would have shipped. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the difference between high and xhigh is the bug you ship versus the bug you catch. Next, if you've been manually setting thinking budgets on 4.6, I need you to stop, because now the 4.7 model is doing it for you. On 4.6, you could pass a token budget for reasoning, basically telling the model how much to think before answering. Small budget for simple tasks, bigger budget for hard ones. You had to tune it manually for every task, and getting it wrong meant either sluggish responses or shallow ones. That's basically gone in 4.7. Fixed thinking budgets aren't supported anymore. Instead, you get adaptive thinking, which means the model decides when to reason hard and when to skip thinking entirely. In practice, the model will fly through a simple lookup and go deep on a complex refactor. And it's better at making that call than you are. You stop managing the model's thinking, you manage what you ask it to do. The payoff is time. The setup time you used to spend tuning thinking budgets is gone. The decisions you used to make about whether a task deserves a deeper reasoning are gone. What remains is the work itself. That's it. If you want to push the model toward more thinking on a hard problem, just tell it directly. Something like, think carefully and step by step. This is harder than it looks. If you want it to stop overthinking a simple lookup, tell it to prioritize a quick response over deep reasoning. Plain language, no settings panel. The way it should be. Because after all, this is AI. The model knows when it needs to think harder. That's its job, not yours. Now, for the fifth habit, which is the one I teased at the start and the reason for all four previous ones exist. It's the mindset update underneath the other four. It's the switch from pair programming with the model to delegating it to it. Pair programming means sitting next to someone and guiding them step by step. You explain, they type. You correct, they adjust. Delegation means briefing someone, trusting them to execute, and reviewing the result. Both are real working modes. They demand different skills from you. Earlier models were pair programmers. They needed your hand on the wheel because they'd drift without it. Habits like line-by-line correction and constant clarification made sense for those models. 4.7 doesn't need that hand. It's capable enough to be briefed and left alone for most of the task. Every one of the first four habits is a symptom of this bigger update. Load the first turn, batch your questions, use xhigh, trust the thinking. Those are all things you do naturally if you were delegating instead of hoovering. They only feel like habits to learn because the old pair programming reflexes are still in your hands. When you switch modes, cycle time drops. Output quality climbs. The work stops feeling exhausting. You're not managing the model anymore. You're briefing a capable operator and reviewing the output. On your next Claude Code session, notice how you're interacting with the model. If you're correcting, clarifying, or re-explaining, you're still pair programming. If you're writing a proper brief and reviewing the output, you've made the switch. Briefing, as opposed to prompting, is the skill that separates real AI work now. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. If this was useful, give me a like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.